Because Brexit was always sold as this completely amorphous blob, Brexit could be about anything. And if anyone was questioned, shall we say, too hard on one particular subject, be it immigration, trade, sovereignty, etc., then they could always just switch over to the next thing. And unfortunately, because it was just so much an amorphous blob, there are big details to be discussed, especially when it comes to trade, because as I am trying to make clear to a lot of people, you look at every other country out there, probably bar the non-European ones that are in the EU, and trade deals are big politics. We're talking big politics. These can either completely sink or make governments, depending on whether they do or don't support or what they intend to do with these trade deals. And we are only now just realizing this. After very much the debacle of what has been seen as the Australian trade deal, we have been seen throwing not only farmers under the bus, but potentially will have other big ramifications round the corner. We've also seen Grant Shapps potentially leading quite a sizable rebellion against the Canadian and Mexico trade deals that are also meant to be in the pipeline at the moment. And now we've potentially also got one with India on the horizon. And here's the thing, the Conservatives, shockingly, again, like I say, this we're going to Conservative Home today, are almost shockingly realizing, oh, actually, doing trade deals, or at least all these free trade deals that we made sound so amazing, so fantastic, might not be that good, because it might lead to lots of jobs in the UK leaving, and then us having to rely on exports. Oh, sorry, on imports, shall we say. And that's not good for the UK economy, because it's certainly not good if you want jobs. And here's the thing, the first area that is going to get hit by the negative effect of most of these trade deals in the loss of jobs due to these trade deals, where's it going to be? It's going to be in the north. So, shock of horrors, today I saw in Conservative Home that actually kind of worried about doing a trade deal with India. Something that, again, many Brexiteers put up there as a big prize. Maybe not as much as like the American trade deal with, doing it with Trump, because that would have made, leaving, or at least made remaining in the single market customs union seem completely silly. One of the other trade deals, again, they very much tried to go after was, of course, India, because, again, it's part of the whole Empire 2.0 thing, if you remember us talking about that a lot at the time. Well, they're now worried. They're now incredibly worried about what this Indian trade deal might actually mean for them politically. And, of course, the consequences economically it might have on the UK. So, let's go diving into what newfound problems they've had with doing a free trade deal, even though at one point they were all about doing these free trade deals with these countries. So, before we do that, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And, of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And, of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button and, of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, let's go diving on over into Conservative Home. With this article by Sam Bidwell, who is the parliamentary researcher and director for the Centre of Commonwealth Affairs, with the title of "Britain Shouldn't Sell Its Soul for a Trade Deal with India." So, post-Brexit Britain is learning the hard way that its starry-eyed commitment to free trade is by no means global orthodoxy. As we said all the time, why are you subscribing to this free trade nonsense when most of the other countries around the world will engage in some sort of protectionism like the EU does? Do you not understand the benefits itself of protectionism, because you are protecting your industries in your own country here? But again, they don't seem to understand that. So, with the work of rolling over the EU deals mostly done, Kimmy Badnoch's shiny new department for business and trade has turned its collective mind to try to strike a trade deal with India. The appeal is clear: a proverbial trading duel in the proverbial Brexit crown, sorry, should I say? A comprehensive deal which would have been impossible within the rubric of bureaucratic Brussels. It wouldn't have been impossible at all. It would not have been impossible at all. But just as we are going to go into, remember, India, very, very protectionist, very, very sort of self sufficient, reliant. That is what their economy really has been built on. No other country in the world has managed to do such a comprehensive sort of trade deal with India. So why all of a sudden are they going to do one with us? So, in reality, the picture hasn't been so rosy. A lack of trust and a tense historical relationship have marred the negotiations from day one. And there is a sense that London needs an Indian deal to validate its vision of global Britain, while the confident and assertive India, with its team of hardened experts, sees this as more of an opportunity for a victory lap. Delhi's team has demanded relaxed visa rules and most recently the the restitution of historical artifacts. This comes weeks after talks were paused in the wake of the Sikh nationalist protest outside the Indian High Commission in London. This shouldn't surprise us. Modi has a track record for complicating the modern Anglo-Indian relationship with talk of the past. The economic picture is equally complicated. India has historically been, and in many ways remains, one of the world's greatest protectionist nations. As we said at the beginning, why? What do we have to give them? Why are they going to open? Why are they going to do such a comprehensive free trade deal? Which, bear in mind, no one else has been able to do. So, while the 20th century heyday of the licensed Raj is over, the country maintains an eye-watering 13.8% average tariff rate compared with the EU's 6% and New Zealand's 2%. Once, as we said before, these trade deals where they talk about, oh yes, we'll remove tariffs, etc., etc. Trade deals have long since gone past that. Nowadays, as you've seen with sort of the EU and again, even New Zealand, tariffs are incredibly low. What it's more about nowadays is doing alignment deals, agreeing on standards, agreeing on regulation as well. That's why the EU is often referred to as a regulatory superpower. But again, the Brexiteers didn't really understand trade and what they were getting themselves into. So the US Trade Department describes India's policy as opaque and unpredictable, often leaving firms downgraded in paperwork. Ouch. So add to the mix the fact that India has a vanishingly small number of existing free trade agreements beyond its immediate neighborhood. Exactly. Why do they need to do a free trade deal with us? They don't. And it soon becomes clear that the goodwill which characterized the FTAs with Australia and New Zealand is nowhere to be found on Racecourse Road. And again, bear in mind the goodwill. Australia and New Zealand, we can see in these trade agreements, took Britain for all it's worth. This, again, idea of, oh, they're our Commonwealth friends. Surely we'll be able to do a good deal with them, right? And remember, if you thought leaving the EU was hard, wait until all these negative consequences come in from the Australia and New Zealand trade deal. We have and would have an even harder time trying to do that unless we actually just physically tore up the deal. Australia and New Zealand have no reason to reopen negotiations, and if they did, they could demand a lot more harsher concessions in any renegotiation. So that just goes to show you how bad those Australian New Zealand trade deals have left the UK in a position for any future renegotiations. So Despite all this, Britain's eagerness for a deal leaves us at risk of accepting whatever Delhi puts in front of us. Leadership hopeful Badnoch might find herself unable to resist the pull of the headline grabbing Indian deal, and a backbench Brexiteers are also eager to prove the UK's ability to stand on its own 2 feet. However, a note of caution: Britain should not sell its soul for a deal with India. If Delhi won't budge on visas or the restoration of colonial treasures, the British team must be willing to walk away. Failing to do so would be disastrous. So here's the thing: restoration of colonial treasures. Yeah, absolutely. We should do this. I mean, the British Museum is full of, well, other people's stuff, is the best way to describe it. But even as I think there's John Oliver did a thing about this, about how, look, if you repatriate stuff, then other people are more willing to come and do exhibitions and share stuff like every other museum around the world does. And this idea that a lot of these people have of, oh, the British Museum will just end up an empty cavern. No, the British Museum has thousands of exhibits and stuff locked away in its archives. The stuff that you see on display at the British Museum is but a tiny fraction of what is actually being stored in its basements and archives. So there's a lot more stuff it could be putting on display. But anyway, back to it. Then, of course, the visa one as well. The last thing they want is, of course, highly expected, is for, shall we say, own people in their party to start complaining about all those visas that get granted to the Indians. And of course, we know that's something that will happen. It happened before back in the 1950s, where we saw, again, part of a big migration from people from India. We saw that thing happen again. It's they really don't want to do it because they know it will be an incredibly bad look, not bad, yeah, be very bad optics for them when they start to do that, and that they're trying so hard to crack down on small boats. Like I say, the Brexiteers and particularly the UKIP infiltration will have an absolute fit. But back to it. The best case scenario for a deal done hastily seems a very naive, as Britain is taken for a ride by Delhi's hardened negotiating team, and that's ultimately, I think, what will happen, who will extract very various concessions by cleverly agreeing to drop their bolder demands. A deal in which is seen to be a bad deal for Britain will bruise the Brexiteer confidence and give credence to those who said that we were better off relying on the Brussels safety net. This is the same for any trade deal. And you don't even have to say that now. You can say that about the Australian and New Zealand trade deals. And bear in mind, we haven't even seen what's in the Canadian and Mexico trade agreements yet. Because this is how trade deals are normally done. Inside the EU, everything was open, everything could be seen. We knew what the EU was signing, what it was going to be doing, because that's what it had agreed to do with all these countries, that it will be open in its negotiations. Everyone else, when they're doing these trade talks, does it behind closed doors, and you don't know what's being put in the agreement until it's been signed on the dotted line. Again, Australian trade deal, prime example. So, in the worst case, the government humiliates itself by caving to those demands, opening the floodgates for a whole host of complicated discussions around restitution, reparations, and relocation. As Modi has continuously positions India as the leader of the global South, the prospect of reparations becoming an established bargaining chip in trade negotiations should terrify Whitehall. Again, the Conservatives do not want to be seen doing that because, like I say, someone like Lee Anderson would probably have a heart attack if he found out we had to pay reparations as part of doing a trade deal with India. So, It would be a dangerous position for this government's timely attempts to try and re engage with the Commonwealth with the sense that Britain is willing to empty its archives for quick cash. No symbolic Brexit victory is worth turning London into the world's biggest post colonial cash for gold scheme. Ooh. Okay, my dude. Um, those artifacts, in a large case, in fact, the most majority of the cases were stolen. They were just, oh, that looks cool. I'll just take that. And then it wound up in the British Museum. But yeah, describing it as a cash for gold scheme, wow. That's yeah, definitely is where this we know where this person stands on sort of restoring all those stolen treasures that we happen to take, and again probably in the British Museum's archives, probably not even being shown or even exhibited. So Badnock and her team should try and reevaluate their approach, even if it means having to weather a short-term political storm. The long-term damage of putting pen to paper on a deal that compromises on sovereignty is far greater than a handful of grumbling Eurosceptics. Um, Absolutely not. The Eurosceptics will sort of push for this deal because they are free trade market fundamentalists. They don't really care what happens to the UK economy so long as they get this wonderful free trade agreement. Because to them, oh look, global Britain. Meanwhile, our economy suffers because of that trade deal. So what we have is already working well. The Indian firm Tata is the UK's largest private sector employer, and the UK is already the fifth biggest source for FDI in the Indian market. Trade continues to increase year on year, and while a comprehensive deal would be nice, it isn't a necessity. Again, showing the realities of trade deals in this modern age, it's not about removing tariffs because, again, historically around the world, tariffs are at an all-time low. What most trade deals are about now are about agreeing standards, uh, like reciprocity of qualifications and stuff like that. It's about all the standards and sort of agreements on subsidies and things like that. That's what most trade deals are done about today. It's not about the tariffs, as you see someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg bang on about all the time. Oh, we need to set tariffs at zero. Again, that would not be in the UK's best interest to do. But there we go. So instead, the government should try and focus on a few narrow sectors, and especially sector-specific cooperation, of mutual recognition of professional qualification, reduction of tariffs, luxury goods, and of course, certainly for investors. These are achievable, and in the mutual interest of both parties, would unlock a number of hitherto untapped economic opportunities. While not as eye catching as a comprehensive FTA, a limited approach would lay the groundwork for a measured, gradual alignment while making clear that Britain can afford to walk away from the table. Humbler foundations may one day blossom into a full formed comprehensive deal, but in the meantime, the government should take a more mature look at its relationship with Modi's India before building trust and diving headfirst into the weeds of a comprehensive free trade. Sometimes less can be more. Except that's not what the Brexiteers want. They want that free trade deal. They are obsessed with getting that free trade deal. That is what they want. That is what they idolize. And because we are trying to do these free trade deals at completely breakneck speeds, when most free trade deals take on average between about 7 or 8 years to be negotiated in the first place. And then after that, you're talking at least 3, maybe to 4 years to implement. You're looking at the best part of a decade, if not more, for a free trade deal to come into full effect. And even then, as we said, most other countries around the world, these types of trade deals are big, big politics. Now, trust me, you can find many a trade agreement, many a free trade deal that got completely torpedoed because everyone realized the current government was going to, well, the current government was either negotiating or what it was going to sign was very, very bad. The opposition party used it as a massive leverage stick. They get in, they completely torpedo the deal, bang, it's gone. That is normal practice around the world for a lot of free trade agreements. Now, if, as you said, the UK wants to go and do these small bits and pieces, specs, sector specific stuff, okay, that's fine. But the idea of like launching into a full free trade agreement, which we know Badnoch wants. Why does Badnoch want that? Well, she has still very much a lot of leadership ambitions. And of course, there's nothing more would be a big feather in the cap than be able to stand on that conservative stage once again and say she was the one who got that Indian trade deal. And of course, what cries will come back? You'll get another conservative on that bench, on that podium, who will go, yes, and it's had this, and this negative effect on our economy. Trust me, it will not be the big win that she certainly hopes for, but it is one that she's trying to push for, and especially Rishi Sunak as well. So we'll have to see what happens here, but it's very interesting now that Conservatives are getting very, very nervous about signing a free trade deal with India when, once again, it was a big win. It was a big Brexit win for us. Wouldn't it be amazing to have this free trade deal with India? We'll be re-engaging with the Commonwealth. India has been very clear from day one. To quote their trade minister, I believe at the time, I think he might have changed, he said, India will not become the UK's Brexit bazaar. So, what more better to leave you on than with that? So, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a motivation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.